probably the first and most expensive improvement we made was we put the Red Ryder BB gun in here. Hog Daddy already had the gun rack in here, and we've since bought a farm, and we call it the Red Ryder Farm. I think it was meant to be. And I put the seatbelts in one day, and I've got some time lapse of it, and then that was when my skill ran out. So I'm here with my wife. Her father gave her an old 68 Bronco. It's the truck type, so probably the least, I'll insert how many they made. It's definitely the least popular, like the least produced. You know, they made like an SUV, kind of a covered top, and then they made like a Baja top. It was open, 4-seaters. Both those were 4-seaters. And this is a 2-seater. It's just like a little pickup truck. There's only 2 of us, Emily and Joey, so 2 works for us well. So Hog Daddy had, in 2017, I found some pictures when I was up helping with Hog Rock on a computer that I was on, and I found 4 pictures that he took right after it got back from the restoration in 2017. I asked him if he had any pictures from before, like what it looked like when it went off, and he did not. Everything money-wise, for paint and body work and all that, I mean, the Bronco ran when we got it. It was perfectly fine. The only thing that it did not have that was working was brake lights. So I literally took it into the shop to get the brake lights fixed. That's where this started. I've put a lot more on it than brake lights at this point. So I'm going to run through today and just talk through I've got my list of all the upgrades. It's 5 pages long with all the parts and all the labor broken out, and I'm not going to tell like how much we spent on it. I will say I've restored 2 vehicles now. I did an old John Deere that my granddad gave me, and I did it pretty much back to original condition and upgraded everything on it that was broke. I fixed, I painted it, redid the motor. And basically this Bronco's done the same thing. Hog Daddy did the cosmetic stuff and got it running, and then I basically just took everything and got it basically roadworthy like a modern machine. So we did fuel injection, brakes, we made it very safe. It's a safe vehicle now, or safe as it can be for a 1968. So what I'll say is I'm not very good at this kind of stuff. I'm good at certain things, and this is not one of them. I quickly realized that when I was doing my John Deere. And I just try to find good people who will do good work. And what I'll say is, if you're planning to do a renovation on anything, you're not going to make money if you're paying other people to do the work for you. You might make money if you're doing all the work yourself. Probably not. You know, by the time you get parts, COVID was rearing during all this. The supply chains were wrecked. It took forever to get parts. For everything we wanted to do, it took forever to get parts. And then everything's just expensive. You have to buy the parts, and then you have to pay the labor. And I'd say anywhere from $100 to $150 an hour is what you're going to pay a mechanic or a shop to do the work. And that's if you can get in. Most of them are so snowed under and busy that they're not even going to talk to you. I mean, I talked to tons of mechanics who I thought could do a good job. That's what they did. And I wound up just finding 2 guys that worked at a shop here in Nashville, a very popular shop. And then they actually spun off, and you'll meet them in the video. But I'd say anywhere from $100 to $150 is what you should plan on paying. And that's a lot. I mean, they do great work, and you can pound it out, and they get the job done. But by the time you pay, I think on both restorations that I've done, I've probably spent what the vehicle is worth. So if you have a vehicle and you want it to be like almost brand new again, and I didn't even do the paint and cosmetic work on this, came with it, which that would push it even higher. And I mean, both the John Deere tractor and the Bronco, I'm breaking even after I do them. So this is not a money-making endeavor. You just do it because you like the vehicle and it has some value to you, sentimental or otherwise. I'll go through like what we did, and I'll kind of tell you how much in parts, was it a big expensive? I'm going to go in most expensive upgrade to least expensive upgrade. And I'll try to give you an idea of the labor that's involved in that, and then you can price the parts on the internet, and just know that when you do some of these first couple of things, they were big upgrades, and it's hard to get them right. So you're going to be tinkling with some things along the way, tinkering to get them dialed in. So just be ready for that. This was over a year. I mean, she got it for her birthday 1 year, and we just got it back after basically being gone for a year in different garages along the way, doing different projects. So the very first thing we did was I got it from Hog Daddy, and I took it in. We got the brakes fixed. We were going to get the brake lights fixed. I went to several garages, and only one would even talk to me. And they said, sure, bring it in, we'll look at it. And oh, by the way, there's a guy here, he loves old Broncos. And that's the only reason we're taking it, because it's an old car. Most of the garages, they were like, it's a 68, we're not touching it. Nobody, don't even bring it here. So I was just lucky. I found this one garage with this one guy who happened to love Broncos. And I thought that was good. And honestly, I thought, while I've got the guy, it was actually a father-son. And I was like, while they're in the neighborhood and they love Broncos, let's go ahead and just work down a list. So I paid them to do like a check, just look the whole thing over and give me a list of what the thing needs. Now, I would not recommend anyone ever say that to a mechanic. Especially if you look like you have a wallet, because what they will do is make a giant list. And he did these, Carl and his son did not do that, I don't think. I think they shot me pretty straight. What they came back with made a ton of sense. So we started down the list. So this was 2 different shops, 2 different runs. I'm going to go top to bottom. The most expensive thing we did after that was the brakes. We were trying to fix the brakes. And the most expensive thing we did was when he touched the wires, basically all the plastic that was on the wire, it basically just crumbled because it was original wiring. I'd already looked at wiring harnesses and upgrading the wiring harness. So you can kind of see all the wires, we came off the battery post, and you can see everything's been rerouted, and I don't know what this braiding stuff's called. There's a name for it. It's on the list. I've read it 100 times. But basically the entire vehicle's been rewired. All the lights, everything's rewired on that end. And then everything got rewired into the glove box. There's the fuel injection system. And then there's the whole new, fuse box there. And I'll be honest, I think we had to replace the entire interior of this because it was just a mess. I mean, it was the old wiring system was original to the vehicle. To do all that, it's up on a lift. They're tearing out the dash. That was 65 hours of work. So by far the biggest expense of the entire thing was to get it rewired. Now the next thing, I'm about to get a little dirty. The next thing we did was we replaced the brakes. When you would hit the brakes on it, they worked. They were original. But they were not disc brakes, and when you hit the brakes, you would kind of lunge off the side of the road. And we did a full brake package. It was front and rear, so this is the rear. And then the front brakes, we did those as well. And then some of this steering linkage was not quite up to snuff, so we worked on that. And then there was, we did axle work as well. So I've kind of got my notes here. I'm just going to run down the high points on it. So the front brake installation was about 6 hours of work. And then the rear brakes and rebuilding the hub on the front axle, because that's what was messed up on the axles, that was about 12 hours of work. So with the brakes, we put a new vacuum and master cylinder. And then one of the problems we had was that was hooked into a carburetor, which we later got rid of. But whenever you'd pound on the brakes hard, the vacuum could have probably been adjusted, but the vacuum was sucking on the motor, and it would kill the motor. So we wound up putting this a vacuum pump, which fixed the brakes problems. And you can stand on it at this point. It has no impact on the engine, and it just makes a little noise when you start it. Which then brings us to the next most expensive item, and that's the Sniper fuel injection system. Now this was a mess. Just a straight up mess. Now, I am not mechanically inclined, and it had a carburetor, a little 2-barrel carb on it, and You know, we could have probably adjusted on that and got it where it ran. The problem I was having was sometimes I would come out and it would start right up. And then other times I would crank and crank and crank, and it would, like I was afraid I was going to burn the starter up. I would crank so long on it to get it to run. You know, and I couldn't really tell, there was no rhyme or reason to what would cause it to operate perfectly fine one time and not the other. It wasn't whether it was hot one time or cold one time, or if it's cold outside or hot outside. I mean, I literally couldn't nail down what was the problem. And that just tore me up, because I was like, I can't have where I'm out driving around and it just won't start. You know, a fuel injection system takes all that kind of stuff out of the mix, where, you know, I get in it now and it starts right up. Now, getting that system dialed in, it was a mess. It took several trips back and forth to get it dialed in. And at first I thought we had spent a lot of money on a system that was going to have to get ripped out and put back the way it was. And it took several trips and a lot of research from Carl. He did a lot of research and talked to a lot of people, and we finally got it dialed in correctly after a few trips and a few tries. It was a nail biter there for a little bit, though. I was really worried. So you'll see kind of one of the weird things about it, you got this little wonky air filter. So we started off with this air filter. It's for the, you know, it's a 200, it's an inline six. This is not the motor that came in the Bronco. It's like out of a Ford Falcon, I think, or something like that. But it's a 200 inline six. Very popular motor. Pretty bulletproof. We did not have to replace the motor yet. But you can see we had to change it out and go with this small one, because what was happening was this throttle linkage, when you'll see it in some of the videos, when you would hit the gas, it had a catch in it where it would not do anything, and then you'd press it and then it would just go too far, and the thing would, I told Carl, it was literally like driving a Bronco, bucking Bronco. So we've come up with this. This fixed it. It got it up and it got an angle on it. And then he also made some adjustments with the software. You know, you saw in the glove box, there's a little digital monitor, and you can make adjustments. And this is temporary. I mean, it works. It cleans the air, lets air in. I'm going to carve out the bottom of that other air filter and put some like metal electrical duct tape like they use in HVAC systems. And I'm going to basically just let that go up into the air cleaner. I'm just going to carve it out, and then that'll get a bigger air filter on this. So this is I'm still working on it. Now, for that, because we were having so much trouble getting it to run correctly, we actually took it to a dyno and had it dyno run, which is definitely not needed for a little 75 horsepower motor, but we felt silly being in there with all these. They were literally doing hot rods and things. So that costs, you know, you had to pay for the dyno guy. And then that's probably 17 hours to get it converted from a, you know, when you do the fuel injection system, you have to do the fuel pump, which I'm about to go talk about the fuel system. That's the reason I wound up pulling the trigger on it, is because we were going to have to redo some stuff in the fuel tank anyway. But you have to redo the fuel pump, and then some of the electrical stuff. But the wiring harness that we'd already done made this change a lot easier than it would have been otherwise. So it just made sense to do it. And now that we've got it dialed in, I love it. It works great. As soon as I say that, it'll start running horribly. Is what it is. I don't know that I got any video of this, but when I went to we got the thing from Hog Daddy, it came with gas in it. And I went to the gas station and I filled it up. And as soon as it was getting ready to turn off, and all of a sudden gas starts running down on the ground. And the filler was not working. It had a hole in it, so it was leaking through that. So as long as it wasn't full, you could be fine. But we replaced the fuel tank. I think the fuel tanks on these things are pretty tiny. They were like 13 gallons. And we put a high capacity stainless, I think it's stainless steel. It's a Lick Creek. Carl knew the guy who made them. And it's a much bigger tank. It's like 23 gallons, I believe. And it should probably be made of gold for what it cost. But that was all that, fixing the filler issue and replacing the tank. And working on we put a new fuel sending pump in it, and we redid the fuel lines because we were doing the fuel injection system. So it was all kind of together. I was doing this anyway, and we just went ahead and gutted the whole fuel system and redid it, brought it up to modern standards. This side of it was probably about 5 hours of work getting that ripped out and reinstalled. Now the tires that were on it, I think they were from, so he redid it in 2017, and the tires were not worn out at all because he had not driven it enough to really wear them out, but they were old enough that they needed to be replaced just due to, you could have a blowout driving on the interstate. And I've always liked BF Goodrich, the TA radials and all that. So we put mud terrain tires, which is basically what came off of it. We left when I was in high school, this rim was pretty popular. This little, I might switch out at some point if I ever get too rich, which is not ever going to happen. I thought about putting slot mags on it because I think they would look nice. But you can also see we redid the hub. That was part of that axle upgrade where we redid the hubs on the front axle. When we got it delivered the very first night, Emily was driving it in the parking lot of the place we were at with Hog Daddy, and I noticed that the headlight was aimed way up in the air and it was hitting the top of a building as they went around the corner. And I tried to adjust the headlights that were on it, and they weren't very bright. They were original, you know, they were just the old style bulb. And wound up, we priced out this KC LED kit, and these things are bright, and we just thought if we're going to be out driving around, we need to be able to see. So we had to do a lot of the housings and everything to get them to aim correctly. We had to redo all the housings that go behind all that, and then everything just wired into the new wiring harness, and it worked out pretty well. But I really like these. I think they look pretty slick too. Now on the inside, there's a couple of ways you can redo the steering column. We just rebuilt this one. It was existing. I think he may have had to change out the steering wheel with one he had, but you can also just ship off and get a rebuilt one sent in. But he rebuilt this one himself, and really the only thing that we did in here of any consequence, I mean, we redid some of the knobs and stuff, but and we redid some of the gauges. But that was probably the biggest ticket item, was rebuilding the steering column. We had to rebuild the heater core because it was leaking coolant in the floor. And every time you would pull the lever to like move the air up into the dash or down into the floor, a bunch of dirt would come out. So it was full of wasp nests, dirt daubers. So that's all been redone. It doesn't leak in here anymore. You know, some of the smaller stuff that was just maintenance, I say smaller in like it was a few $100s. Everything else on the list was like, you know, a few $100s here. But those, I swear, those little few $100s here, a few $100s there, they add up pretty quick. So we did a service on the rear axle, and part of that was we just kind of repacked all the bearings and ordered new ones if they were broken and put new seals in it. Up front, we did a C bushing kit. I'll be honest, I don't know what it is. I looked it up while we were doing it. It made sense. I knew we had to do it. And I think I've forgotten. It's been so long since we've done that. I think it was up front. I'm almost positive. We also put, it was just a metal floor. And we ordered the rubber floor mat, which goes across. And basically all you have to do is just cut out the gear shift. But I didn't want to mess with that, and he was in there. And then we got, you know, the Bronco floor mats. You know, on April 1st, when I went to pick it up, the battery died. So that was I thought I had done way worse than that. So I actually called Carl. If I'd have known it was just a battery goof up, I would have fixed it myself. But I called Carl. He came, picked me up, and got me going. And then we went to the battery store, and we put a new battery in it. I thought it was crazy that happened literally on the way home, as I'm worried about that thing causing me problems. At one point, the speedometer cable, it was like jumping around and making a lot of noise, so we had to fix that. The temperature gauge was not working at all. And then the amp gauge wasn't really working at all. The fuel gauge has always worked fine, and the oil pressure has always worked fine. And I think he put new LED bulbs into there, so it's pretty bright. You can see everything. And I think we kept everything. I think the volt gauge, you know, the amp gauge, ampometer, we had to actually change the whole gauge out on that. When you want to turn on the heat, you come in here and you pull this guy. And what it does, I'll take you outside and show you what it does. Then you turn the fan motor off and on. And if you want to go defrost, you pull that. That's when the bugs would fall out. But that lever pulls and opens. So that lever triggers this, and it lets the coolant go into the heater core from the motor. And none of this was here. I think there were, this definitely was not here, so it was just running heat all the time. And you would ride in this thing and it'd be running heat in the middle of summer. And nobody wants this. I bought a car cover. And when it went back to the shop, I took the car cover off and I put it in my shed. And those damn squirrels, I've been fighting squirrels at my house, and there's one that lives in my shed, and he literally demolished the car cover. So that's $150 for the car cover, and it's gone. It went literally in the trash after one use. I'll never buy another one, and I'm still hunting that squirrel. The 5th one. And then remember I said I took it in for the brake lights getting fixed? Well, they're fixed. I did a lot of work to get my brake lights fixed. We did an oil change to make sure the oil was changed. We welded a broken exhaust hanger that would kind of clang around when you hit the brakes. The belt was squealing, so we had to repolish the pulley on that. And then we serviced the manual transmission and the transfer case, just to make sure all the fluids in those were in good shape. So the only thing we've not done on this Bronco, it's basically all brand new. I've got to get in here and clean out the engine bay. So I haven't really detailed the engine bay, but I plan to. I'll do that whenever. We're going to hobble along with the inline 6. Hopefully it just lasts forever. It's fine. None of it really leaks any fuel. So the transfer case was not replaced. The manual transmission was not replaced. It's a 3 on the tree. I mean, there's just not much that can go wrong with those things. Knock on wood. Same with the motor. As long as the motor holds together, I'm going to run this motor in it. It doesn't look, brand new or anything, but who cares? When everything, those 3 things, they'll cost a decent amount of money, but at this point we've done all the hard work. It's just literally swap a new motor in. I mean, all the wiring and everything just gets plopped right on the new one. One thing a lot of people do is they'll put V8s in these things, or they'll convert them to a V8 from an inline 6. And Carl and I talked about that, and I don't even want to do that. I actually love the little inline 6 motors that are in these things. And I really don't think this type, the truck type, it doesn't even make sense to me to put a V8 in that. I think the character of the truck means it needs to be a little inline 6. It's not like we're carrying 4 people in here. It's just Emily and I riding around. So it sounds kind of like an old military Jeep with the inline 6 in it. The radiator just gave me a scare, but it's fine too. We replaced the hoses on it and it seems to be working. So engine, transmission, transfer case, and radiator. I guarantee you one of those will go dead before the year's out. That's just part of owning an old car. If you're thinking about doing it, if you have any questions, pop them in the comments below. I'd love to talk about it. So we try to keep, when I restore things, I'd like it to be as original as possible. This back window is not original equipment. I don't know who did that, but most of them have a big open pane of glass. I actually like the way this looks because they put the gun rack in there, and it may give me a little more room on my head so I'm not hitting the glass all the time. But that's not the way that's supposed to look. I don't know if I'll ever fix that. I probably will not. Everything else on it is pretty much correct, minus the headlights, but I mean, you got to change your headlights out. So, all right, there's my old ass Bronco. This is my brother-in-law, Justin. I'm getting my butt. It's literally massaging my butt right now. He literally drives a spaceship.
You can change the camera. Ooh,
I also put an anti-theft system on it. Just a big chain. Chained it to the frame, baby. They got to take the bumper off. Then there's a kill switch they have to defeat. And they got to do it all while it's right in my back door.